So the first game actually, which I want to show you, and during the game I will discuss some things like what I was thinking during the game and why I did make some decisions. And this is a game which I had played a long time ago, and I was playing with black pieces. This was one very nice tournament in Greece, in Athens, and I was facing one Greek international master, and he played e4. So I don't know what is your level overall. Can you tell me, please, what are your ratings, more or less, so I have some idea about your strength? So, Ruhan, what is do you have some FIDE rating?
I just started recently, but so my rating is my hybrid rating is 1100.
Okay, and Brooklyn, how about you?
My rating is 104.
Okay.
It's 1400, yeah.
14, okay. Old school, old crush, old crush road. What can you tell me about you? If you're there, I don't know. Okay, and who else is actually, I think only 3 persons in the moment. Okay, so in this game, I was playing with black, and I have played the move c5. I don't know if you have seen this move, if you play from recently, but this move c5 is normally the beginning of the opening, which is called the Sicilian Defense. And this is probably the most popular reply for black against e4. There is another guy coming, okay. Okay, maybe some of you might think, okay, what is the idea of this move c5? Because this move is not helping to develop neither the knights, neither the bishops. So what exactly is the idea of the move c5? The idea of the move is a similar one to the move e5. So basically, you want to stop the move d4, or if not to stop it, but black is preparing when white in the future plays the move d4. So he trades his c pawn for the central pawn which white has on d4. And this is actually one of the main lines. So basically, Sicilian, you can divide in many parts, but the most common which you divide, the lines are between the so-called open Sicilian. This is when white plays knight f3, like in the game, and he plays d4. If white doesn't want to play d4, we call those lines more or less closed, because without d4, there is not much action in the center because the pawns are not meeting too much. So now I played knight c6 and he plays d4. This is already now with this move, he is entering into the main lines in Sicilian. So black has to take, and basically now the idea is that now from black's point of view, we have these pawns on D and on the E file, so potentially we can push them forward, while white has only one pawn on the E and one pawn on the C. And now it is important for black not to allow the move c4, because if the pawn goes to c4, she will take control of the square d5. So how can we stop the move c4? We can play the move f6, which is attacking the pawn. So now he doesn't have time for such a move like c4. He has to play the knight to c3. And then the pawn remains on c2. So long term, it is very difficult now for white to bring this pawn to the center. And now already black has these 2 pawns against 1. And there are different ideas now for black, depending how do you want to set up. Some people set up like this, e6, and then the bishop can move sometimes to b4 to pin the knight. Other people play e5. This is also possible, to attack the knight and to remove him from there. Also, you can just leave this pawn here and to play d6, and then to decide what to do with the other pawn. And then you can also play g6, which is leading to some other lines in Sicilian. And this system is called the dragon, when you bring the bishop on g7. And also you can play even a move like a6. So there are different possibilities, and it's quite flexible for black. I have decided to play the move d6, which is the most, I think, common, because this pawn has to go to d6 anyway. It's very difficult to push d5. And then you can choose about the other pawn. You can push e6 or e5 if you want. And also, I did some research before the game, because when you're a good player and you play the tournament games, you start to play more seriously. Then in order to get the better results, you have to prepare for your games. How do you prepare for the game? You're checking usually, you're checking what your opponent is playing by, there are some special programs. For example, this program which I use now is called the Chess Base, where you can store basically millions of games. And then with one click, you can find, okay, you have to look for a player. For example, you're looking for Jones. Okay, there are many Joneses, but you look for some player. You write his name. And when you write his name, you can find all his games which are in the database. So this helps you a lot, because if he's a good player, he has many games. And then you can check 50 games, 100 games, what is he playing usually, what is his weakness. You can analyze his game to understand how he plays, even if you never met him. And I saw when I was preparing for this game, that in this line, exactly like I play now this move order, this guy almost all the time takes 96. And I know that 96 is not a good move. So even if I don't play normally this move order with d6, I was hoping that he will continue his usual play. If not, I had something in mind to play some other line in which he didn't have experience, because in all his games he was taking. So sometimes when you prepare, you see, okay, this guy plays against Italian, this against French, this against Sicilian, against this, and you can pick where his weak opening, and you can play exactly this opening which he doesn't like. And he continued with his plan, knight c6. Why this move is not good from White's point of view? It is not a huge mistake, but the move knight c6 now is helping actually black. Why? Because this pawn now is coming to c6. So she becomes more central. She is defending the squares d5 and b5. Also now when the pawn moves, it leaves the file for the rook to go to b8. So, for example, when he moves the bishop in the future, I can move the rook to b8 or the queen to b6, and I have the open b file. That's why this move is not having a good reputation for White. Now he goes bishop to d3, which is his usual plan to develop his bishop. And his idea often is to castle and then to push f4 and then maybe e5, then the queen to h5 and to remove the knight and to attack against h7. So how can I stop this plan? Either I can push e5 myself, or I can close the diagonal by playing g6. I decided to play g6 because now he doesn't have any attack with this bishop on this diagonal, even if he somehow pushes the pawn to e5. And he plays now b3, bishop g7, and bishop to b2. So now the game is, I think, more or less equal, nothing special for the moment. But in those positions, usually, it is time to start to think about what is the plan in the next few moves. What do we want to achieve in general? Not only to think about the next move, but ideally, we have to imagine what we want to do in the future. And then to try to do this, because sometimes we want to do something, but he's not allowing us. And now I was thinking, okay, of course I can castle. And then what should be my plan? What to do with all those central pawns which I have? I have to decide which one of them to push forward. I can go for e5, But if I push this pawn, then the pawn on d6 could become a little bit weak, maybe long term on this file. If I play c5, yeah, this is one possibility. But then I give him in the future this square for the knight to go to d5. So maybe I can go for d5. This looks a little bit maybe more solid, but not now after the castle. And I can prepare a move like d5. So I was thinking that out of those three moves, probably if I have to ever push some of those pawns, it should be maybe the d pawn. But then I thought, okay, in the moment now this knight is defended from the bishop, but I also have the bishop on the diagonal. So if I move the knight to g4 or to h5, my bishop will kind of pin this knight. Or if I move the queen to attack this knight, then I can potentially have two hits against the knight with the bishop and with the queen. So what is the place which can help my queen to attack the knight? It is a5. So I decided to go to a5. And now he has to be very careful because I want to maybe take on e4. In the moment, if he plays some move which is not so good, like, I don't know, to push some pawn, I can play the move like knight e4 because I can win the pawn. And then when he takes my knight with his bishop, I can take this knight. But of course, he plays castle. Now the knight is not pinned. And the problem with this move, knight e4, is that if I take now, this is actually a serious mistake. Okay, let's see. Can you try to find why this move is a mistake? And now, what do you think that white has to do after knight e4?
Bishop captures e5, e4.
Yes. And
then if bishop captures c3 and then bishop captures c6, forking the king and the rook.
Yes, exactly. This is the problem that in the other case, in the previous position, when the king was still on e1, bishop c3 would be a check. But now, since the king is not there, he can just take here and then we lose the rook. Okay, so do you see some other possibility maybe for black? What can we do with the knight? Maybe there is some another useful move which we can make with the knight and again to attack this knight on c3. What do you suggest now?
What about knight d5?
d5, but yeah, the problem is that, okay, maybe he can take it. Okay, now we have 3 hits. So if he takes with the knight, then what? The bishop is hanging, but we can take his bishop. So in this case, I think we have to take, because if you take the knight, you lose this bishop. So you have to take on b2. And now black is attacking the knight. He's defending c7, which is very important. And it's attacking the rook. So now, what is going on here? Who is better, black or white?
Yeah, I think playing knight d5 was kind of a mistake because yeah, white can play rook b1, then threaten the bishop. Yeah.
His knight is hanging, so now, okay, what is the best for black now? He can take the knight, or he can move the bishop back to g7. What?
It's moving the bishop back, because when you fianchetto, like you don't, you must. Is sometimes it's not the best to trade off that bishop, because the
Yes.
weak, yeah, those squares will be weak.
You expose this diagonal, yes. So here is very important, yes, I think, is unless you win something, but I don't think that taking the knight with something, it's better to move the bishop back to g7. And now already, I think he has to move the knight back. He can try, of course, before, because the queen has to guard c7, so the only move is to go back, and then he can move the knight somewhere. But here, I think, after, let's say, black castles, black has a good game because he has a bishop, which is very strong, against a knight. And also you have two bishops, which in the chess, often maybe if you start to watch videos and to read books, you can hear this expression a lot, that someone has a pair of bishops. What does it mean? That you have two bishops and the other one has, like now, either one bishop or one knight, either two knights. And usually we say that the person who has two bishops, like now black has, have some kind of slight advantage, because the bishops are in general slightly better maybe than the knights. So, okay, of course, depends what is the position, but especially in an open game like this, you can do more with the bishops than with the knight. But 95, I think there was, okay, now, yes, it's not losing maybe, okay, but what if he takes with the pawn? You take on c3. And in this case, it is also possible, yes, it's not losing something for black, but I think it's not winning either, because now if he takes, for example, and if he plays what now, bishop to, I don't know, if he takes queen to 6, it is okay. It's actually, it's not so bad, 95, but I was thinking for something else, because this is a bit, also he can play maybe knight a4, then you have to exchange the bishops, and I'm not sure that I wanted to exchange the bishops too much, because like you said, if I lose this bishop, then my king will be a bit exposed. So my idea was completely different, and this was to jump to g4. Why exactly to g4? Because now, can you find, okay, what will happen? Because now we attack the knight, obviously, and behind him is the bishop. So white has to decide now. Either he defends the knight with the queen from somewhere, either he plays knight a4. But the difference with the 95 is that after knight a4, here, black can win something. Okay, let's see who can find what is the best continuation for black. Now, you can think, I suggest when you have group sessions like now, in order not, okay, to speak everybody, because if one of you now says the solution, then the other people cannot think, because they will learn the solution. So usually when I have group sessions with many people, the best is to write in the chat box. There is a chat box, or at least there should be a chat box. Let me see, yeah, here in the chat box. You can send messages which could be to everyone, or they could be to direct message like this. So you can send direct message to me, to Marian Petrov, with your suggestion. What do you think that is the best move? And then the others will not able to see your reply. It is only directed to me. And I can see now how everybody is thinking, because otherwise, if only one is speaking and the others are not, then I don't have a clear idea what is going on with you. So here, can you think a little bit and send me with this chat and then with this direct message your reply? Let's say h5, bishop somewhere, queen somewhere. What do you think is the best move for black? And this will help me to see how do you think and to evaluate when you have problems and what do we have to improve, who is good in the tactics, who is good in the positional game. Okay, so far I have one reply, yes, two. Okay. And both of you actually managed to, yeah, you saw the solution. So it's Mahwadze and Brooklyn for the moment with the correct answers, and I'm waiting to see for the others. Mahwadze, this is it, what is this name? It reminds me a little bit of some Georgian name, Mahwadze. Here in Europe, there is one country, Georgia, in which they have similar names, like they finish on Z or something like this, but I don't know actually what is the common South African name. Okay, Ruhan has another suggestion. I guess all of you are from where? From Cape Town, or it means lucky. Okay, okay. I don't know. In South Africa, do you have except English? I guess you have other languages, right? Some kind of local, even if English is official language, but some South African language. Or because I was in Botswana. I was in Botswana 5 years ago, maybe, but they were speaking in English with me, but between them, of course, they had some other language which I didn't understand anything. Okay, so Bongolet, he has another suggestion. So far, okay, I have two, and Ruhan also has, okay, 4 people have suggested something, and there must be who is not Old Crush. Okay, I think he didn't set anything. And who else? So I will give you 1 more minute to suggest your moves, and then I will show you what was my plan. So let's see who haven't said anything now. Bongoletto, okay, Brooklyn, Mahladze, Old Crush, and Ruhan. Okay. So I think, I don't know if we still wait for someone, but there are 2 suggestions basically. Bishop takes b2 or Queen h5. Yes, the idea, one of the ideas of knight g4 is to attack on h2. But if you play Queen h5, the problem is that when he plays h3, and now you have to move the knight back to f6, and then he can just exchange the queens and there is no attack. Like some of you spotted very well, there is another possibility to attack h2, and this is even to make it with the tempo. First, black has to take on b2, and then when the knight moves to b2, the move Queen e5 is a double attack, because he has to defend now the checkmate with g3, g3 or f4, and then I can simply take b2 because the bishop is defending g4. So of course, yeah, I knew that he will see this because it's quite easy for a good player to see this strat, but then he has to move the queen. So he plays the best move, Queen e1, to defend the knight. And then I just castled. Because the knight g4, actually, I want to go to e5. And then maybe to take this bishop or to do something useful with the knight. So I'm not afraid of the move like h3. And now he still has to be careful. And he played now h3. I have moved knight e5. And now he played the move knight a4. And this was the critical moment of the game where, again, I have to make a very important decision because I have a few possibilities, but all of them are leading to completely different direction. I can, of course, exchange the queens. I can move the queen back. So this is the first question which I had to decide. Do I want to go to the endgame, or do I want to keep the queens? So basically, in such situations, you have to try to evaluate who has more possibilities to create some attack with the queen. If you think that you have some attacking chances, then maybe you can keep. But if you think that he has, better is to exchange. In this case, it is difficult to say who can organize attack. I think it is difficult for both of us because the king looks quite defended very well, especially my king. Okay, I don't see how he can attack my king with his queen. But if I move the queen back, then he can play maybe f4, knight takes, for example, pawn takes, and if I take on b2, he takes with the knight. So in the beginning, I was thinking about queen takes e1, rook takes e1, knight takes d3, pawn takes d3, bishop b2, knight b2. So we have the same game. Okay, I can just play it over the board. Okay, this same game, for example, if I go here, now I don't see which pawn we can win. So where do you see this possibility that we can win some pawn?
So you don't exchange, you don't capture bishop with knight. You just capture, you take the c bishop and capture h3 straight away. Because then if he captures back with g, you can fork the king and the rook with knight to f3.
Yes, okay, this is interesting move, but in those situations, you have to calculate very, very well and to be sure that this move is good. Because now I see two problems with this move. The first is, okay, let's try to evaluate if he simply takes, okay, we have one check, let's say. He goes here, we take the rook, he takes the knight. And what is going on now? In this situation, he has two pieces. We have rook, and we managed to take one. We have 7 pawns against 6. So rook and 1 pawn for knight and the bishop. So what do you think, guys, now about this? Who has better chances, the bishop and the knight, or the rook and the pawn?
Bishop and knight.
Yeah, bishop and the knight, I think, are slightly better. Not so much. I don't think that white is winning or something, but it is more easy to play with two pieces because both of them can do something important. The bishop can defend something, the knight can defend or the opposite to attack, and the rook, it's not much that the rook can do right now. Sometimes, okay, if you have some very important open file, and the rook can take advantage to go, let's say, to go to d8, to d2, or something to attack, or you have some pass pawn, which the rook can defend, you can put the rook behind the pawn. Yes, then the rook could be better, but in this case, it's very tricky. I would prefer also to have the two pieces because maneuver, this knight can move in many places, c4, a5, he can attack this pawn. If I push c5, then maybe d square, he can go with the bishop here. With d5, he can open the file for the rook. So even this is not so clear, if this is okay for me. But yeah, okay, f4, I think is, f4 usually could be a very good move for white because it attacks the bishop and it attacks the knight. And if you move the knight, then you lose the bishop and you don't have this check. But okay, in this case, black can survive with this 93. And then the bishop escapes. So f4 is not winning. Then you have to see the other option, if bishop e5, which is more or less the same, because after bishop e5, I think he would take, and then more or less we have the same position. But yeah, now there are a lot of moves which you have to consider, like pawn takes, like bishop takes, like f4. And you have to be very sure that black is fine. And I don't think that it is maybe so great. And I was thinking actually to take this bishop because anyway f4 is coming. It's very difficult to stop f4. And even sometimes actually white can move the bishop back to e2. And after f4, my knight has only one option to go back to d7, which is not ideal. So better is to take, I was thinking about this endgame, and then to take here. And now my c pawn is on the open file. So I expect him to play d4 and then to press the pawn. So I have to play g5. And now I can bring the bishop to a6, but yeah, this endgame is good for black. No problem at all, but also it's okay for white. So more or less, you can say it's equal position. So what are the other options? Now, queen c7, of course, queen c7, but he can play maybe f4. And again, I have to exchange basically the same position, but with the queens. But I'm not sure now that my queen on c7 is better than his queen on e1. And then I saw another possibility, which was very tricky. This was the move knight f3 check. He has to take, and I have one check with the queen from g5. And I have also the bishop here who is attacking h3. So it looks interesting because there is one check. He has to take. Okay, here he has to take, another check. Then he can go either to h2, either to h1. But I have now maybe bishop h3 and maybe queen h4, and then it looks quite interesting. So I said, okay, I have to calculate this, because if this is winning, then just I have to play it. If not, I can decide later. But definitely I have to check because it looks very interesting. Okay, so I have to calculate now both king h2 and king h1. And here you must be good in the calculation in those situations, because in this case, it is not so difficult actually to calculate, because white has only one move. Knight f3 takes, queen g5, king somewhere. Sometimes it's more difficult because, let's say after knight f3, he could have 3 different moves, and you have to check all of them. In this case, it's only one move, then it's only 2 moves. So it becomes a little bit more difficult with every next move, which is not forced. So I was thinking like this, okay, let's say queen g5 check. He goes to h2 to defend the pawn. I have the same kind of idea when the knight is here, okay, that I can take on b2. When he takes, I can play maybe queen e5 check and to take the knight back. So basically, I will exchange the knight and the bishop for the knight and the bishop, but I will double his pawns, which is not a big problem for white, but still it is something. So I thought, okay, this is at least if there is no checkmate or something like this, I can take the piece back. If he goes to h1, in the beginning, I thought that this is a mistake, because after bishop h3, it looks like this will be a checkmate. Rook g1 is the only move, but then when I continue the line, queen h4 or queen h5, I have bishop here. It looks like bishop f1 now is coming like a checkmate, and there is no defense. But I found out that he can play rook g3. And then when I move the bishop, I cannot win anything with the bishop because his queen is on the dark square. No matter what I move the bishop, he can just play, his rook is already on g3. So he moves the king back to g1. And then I don't have any single check. And then I thought, this is a problem, because if I don't have any checks, I am a piece down. The things are not looking good. So what should I do if he plays not king h2, but king h1? And it took me a long time to calculate, because I thought, okay, if this is not working, maybe I can move the queen to h5 or h4 or f4 to attack, and then to take with the queen.
You see how far ahead he's calculating?
Yes, in this case, I had to...
It's an old game we played.
Yes, in this game, I had to calculate 5-6 moves maybe ahead, or maybe even more. But it was not so hard for me because, of course, I have experience, but also because, like I told you, he doesn't have many possibilities. When I move the queen, he cannot move now the rook, the knight, the bishop. He has to do something to stop the checkmate. So there are not so many possibilities for him to defend. And I have calculated, and in the end I figured out that I cannot lose. So minimum I can make a draw, and if there is some chance to do something, I can try to grab him. So I played knight f3. He was very shocked to see this move because he was not expecting such a move. But okay, now he takes. I go queen g5, and he started to think. This was the critical moment between king h2 and king h1. And actually, I think that king h2 was maybe better for him, because even if I can take the piece back, like I was thinking, and now he can play, for example, queen e3 or f4, and then white is, f4 also is good. White has more or less equal position because there are not so many pieces, and then he moves the queen, and it is not so terrible for white. But he played king h1. And now I told you that originally I thought that this is not good because of the rook g1, and then the queen goes somewhere, let's say, I don't know, here, and he has this rook g3, very annoying move, defending also f3. And if I move here, he has king g2. If I go somewhere, I don't know, somewhere, he just moves the king g1 or g2, and then I'm just a piece down. I don't have any attack. So I had to figure out something else, and my plan was to move the queen, and I was calculating queen h4 and queen h5. I was trying to figure out what is the difference between those two moves. For queen h5, the good thing is that it attacks also f3. So this is kind of double attack. And I was trying to think, okay, what should happen ideally for me that I win the game? You must always have some kind of goal that you want to achieve a certain position. And I thought that in order to win the game, I have to bring the queen somewhere on the h file. The bishop has to be on h3, and then I have to be looking for some decisive checkmate with this bishop. So if the queen is on h5, I can try to go after bishop h3, bishop g4 check, and bishop f3, and queen h1. So this is the good thing. If the queen is on h4, then the good thing is that sometimes I can stop f4. There was, for example, one line which I was looking. If I play now the queen to h4, now he has to play, okay, for example, he plays bishop g7. This is one of the lines which I was analyzing. And now I play bishop h3. He has now queen e3. This move was, I think, very important for him to defend f3, because now I can take the rook, but after king g1, I don't have any check anymore, and in this case, he takes on f1, and again, two pieces for one rook. But I thought that, okay, if he plays now queen 3, the good thing about my queen being on h4 and not on h5 is that now I can play the move, very important move, bishop h6. And then I stop this f4 because I take with the bishop. So after f4, bishop f4, already it should be winning for black, because my bishop now is also very active. And king g1 is the only move. Otherwise, I just give check and take the queen. But now I think I have this, or queen g5 was also very good. And bishop g4, yeah, this was actually the winning idea. Bishop g4, and then queen h5, or bishop f3. And now he takes, and I have this check. It was a very long line, of course, very complicated, but I was trying to calculate something like this. And I figured out that bishop h6 is very important. So this was giving me the reason to play queen h4, because if I don't have bishop h6, if I play again bishop h3, he is defending f3 pawn, and now this is not winning, and I don't have this idea to go here, but I have again bishop h6. So that's why I wanted my queen to be on h4. But then I figured out that if he takes on g7 in this line, now he can take, and after bishop g4, this is actually what happened in the game. I played queen h4, he took on g7, I took on h3. And now he played this, which is losing immediately, bishop f8. This is the mistake. Why this is losing? This was my idea, because now I play bishop to g4. And here, simply, the problem is that even if my queen is not on h5, but it's on h4, he still cannot stop the move bishop f3, because king g2, there is queen h3 check, and king g1, there is bishop f3. So he resigned. So only after 17 moves, I managed to defeat him, but he could have stayed in the game. It was actually, I think he has only one move, queen e3. I was very surprised that he couldn't find this move, because he was a good player and I was expecting him to find. He has to defend the f3. And then my plan was, okay, I think I would have to take the bishop to keep all the threats now with the bishop. And then if he tries to move the rook away to keep his extra piece, now the move f5 was very important. And my idea was to continue with f4 to remove this queen from here, so the pawn on f3 is not defended, because if he goes back to e2, I can give him check. If he goes here, I can give bishop g4. And here, now, okay, in this case he takes, so, and f5, the problem is that here the queen e7 is check. So after rook e1, only after rook e1, I have to start with e5. And even if he has extra knight, actually, this is very difficult for white here to defend, because basically he cannot bring any of those pieces to this area to help the king. The queen cannot move, and there is no f4, and there is nothing. You cannot move the bishop because I take it. And after this, the idea is to play f5 and to open the f file to bring the rooks. And actually, the computer thinks that it's very promising for black. So this is what I was thinking. Or if he moves the king to g1, which is more natural to escape from those check. Now already the pawn on e7 is defended, so I can simply play f5, because I want to push f4, and if he takes, I can just take with the g pawn, and then I have also the g file. So now simply I just move the king to h8 and bring the rook to g8, and I think he will be checkmated in a few moves. So this sacrifice was very, very interesting, and in the end, it helped me to win the game quite fast, and it was very interesting game. Okay, now I want to show you something about the openings, and I know that the most common openings among the juniors are usually the Italian game after black goes c5. Most of the time, white goes knight f3, and I have seen in many, many games that, especially the children and the juniors, they play bishop c4 usually, Italian, and black plays bishop c5. And then I have noticed that most of the kids who don't know a lot of theory, they know that they have to develop, in general, the knights and the bishops, so they play something like this castle. And I have seen many, many games in many countries, in Bulgaria, in abroad, also in Botswana, in America, that this position is actually very common. Until here, more or less, the children know how to set up the knights and the bishops, and from here already, they start to play completely different stuffs. Most of them are not so good moves, but okay. This is a very kind of standard position, which you can see, and Here, there is one main plan which could be dangerous. This is to pin the knights with the bishop. So the main idea, which can try to do something dangerous, is bishop g5. Any black is not careful, if he plays some random move, then to jump knight d5 and to put pressure on the knight on f6. How should black counter this if he ever has reached this position? Overall, when your opponent is pinning the knight and you don't have, for some reason, you don't have the bishop on e7 right now, and the bishop is somewhere away, almost all the time you have to start with h6. And why this is important to insert a move like h6? Because now white has to decide what to do. He can take the knight, and it looks like this is good for white because now he installs this knight on the outpost. You have to bring the queen back to defend on d8, but there is no follow-up. Yes, this knight is very strong, but now white is lacking the dark square bishop, and he cannot take any advantage of the fact that his knight is strong. And then black can start to move this knight. He can play knight a5 to take the bishop, or knight e7 and to exchange the knight, or to attack the knight with the pawn to c6. So this knight is not so terrible because black can very easily trade him. So this is not dangerous. Usually, white prefers to keep the pin. And then black can also pin the knight. And now, this is very tricky, this position, because it looks like black has made a mistake. And now white can jump knight d5 and to put pressure on the knight. And why this move was very important? Because this move helps black to play the move now g5. Without h6, there will be no g5. And here the point is that also this knight is pinned. So you cannot sacrifice knight g5. Sometimes, for example, if black plays some move like, okay, let's say this move, a6, and you have this position, white can sacrifice with the knight, then to take with the bishop. And now black cannot defend the knight because the queen is behind him. There is no pawn, there is no bishop, and simply white is winning after two moves. But when the bishop is pinning the knight, now this sacrifice is not working because you lose the queen. And the bishop has to go back, which means that now the knight is not pinned anymore. And now black can pin the knight himself. And here white is in a lot of trouble because now it is very difficult to get rid of this pin, especially if he takes it already, he's losing, because now black will simply take with the knight and with the bishop, and then it will be h5, h4. So this is something which you have to know about this kind of positions, that the pins are very unpleasant, but still black can solve this problem by playing h6. And I think now, okay, of course, white can also play h3. And then already black has to decide, because now it could be totally the opposite. If black goes to h5 to repeat the same moves, now white can play g4, and then he takes advantage of this pin. So you see, it can go both ways. It depends who is not so well prepared for this kind of positions. And obviously, the most easiest approach from both of the players is immediately after d3 that actually black can play the move h6. In many situations, move like h6 is a waste of time, but now, when white is not playing aggressively in the center and he's not trying to win some space, sometimes it's worth to stop this pin, and then if white plays the same, this is basically the same position, but without all those complications, then usually they go bishop e3. And now another very common mistake, which I see in this type of positions, is that when black plays knight d4, some more inexperienced kids, they blundering by taking knight d4, and after pawn takes, of course, they lose a piece. So if you want to take this knight, you have to do it with the bishop in this case, not with the knight, otherwise you lose a piece. So this is again something which often happens. Okay, guys, if you have now some questions, the last few minutes, you can ask me anything, whatever you want, openings, endgames, if you have some other questions about your game, the things which you don't understand or you want to improve, or whatever you want to ask. Or do you think you know everything? What is your biggest problem in the game? Okay, what can you tell me? The things which you don't like and you don't, they're causing you some troubles in when you play game.
Me is usually when I'm playing over the board, I have the advantage and everything, but then I end up losing it because I can't keep it. So
Okay.
like,
But
yeah.
why this is happening? What do you think is the reason? Why do you
I don't know how to maintain my advantage.
do you have? It could be because sometimes you have problems with the time control. Maybe you got into time trouble and you don't have a lot of time, or it's not this.
No, it's not about time. Usually time I have.
You have time, but you make, okay, maybe you lose concentration when you, some people, when they are winning, they think, okay, the game is over, and they kind of lose concentration and they make some stupid mistakes. It also could happen that you have to be focused until the end, basically until the other guy resigns. Even if you think that now you are much better and you win maybe very soon, but until you have extra piece or extra rook or extra queen or something, if it's only advantage positional or only a couple of extra pawns, the game is not finished. So you have to try to keep concentration, or maybe if you have a problem with realizing the advantage, I can give you one tip, which maybe you know, but that when you have something extra, like a couple of pawns or extra piece or something more material, the easiest way to win the game is to start to exchange pieces. You always have to try to exchange the queens if you have extra material, then to exchange the rooks, to exchange the bishops and the knights, because when you exchange everything, you will be left with the extra piece which you have. So this is the thing that the most important is that when you have extra piece, for example, the only chance for your opponent is attack on the king. So your king has to be very safe. Don't make any moves which are exposing your king. Keep many pieces close to your king. If he has some initiative, you just have to play a little bit defensive moves to protect the checkmate and the attack, and then try to exchange pieces to slow down his attack. And when the attack is over, simply it should be winning. Okay, who else can do questions? Mahadze, what do you think? What is your biggest problem in the game? I don't know if he's there, but okay, or Uruhan.
No, I'm okay, thanks.
You're fine, okay, you know everything, okay. Well, okay, if you don't have any questions, guys, okay, there was some problem, endgame. Yeah, endgame, of course, is very tricky, and we're going to have some sessions for the endgame, because this is the stage where, especially if the players are equally good, and you cannot defeat your opponent by checkmating or winning material, often you go into endgame, and then it is very important, actually, the knowledge. Here, endgames you have to learn. There is no other way. You have to learn them, and I am going to show you the most basic endgames first, of course, because you must know when you go into endgame, is it winning, is it losing, is it a draw? This will help you to make a decision. Sometimes, for example, you have a choice. you can keep attacking to keep the queens, or you can go into the endgame. And if you
Can I
don't,
ask a question? I figured out a question.
yeah.
What are things you have to consider when transitioning into the middle game from the opening?
Yes, when you transition to the middle game, this is the moment when you have to find a plan. How, after you developed already the knights, the bishops, and to castle, you have to find what is the right plan for you. And ideally, you must know this plan before the game, because when you choose your opening, the opening actually is very important to be picked very good, and it has to fit to your style. For example, if you like to play more attacking, more aggressive, to take the initiative, you have to choose some openings which allow this. If you want to play more solid, then you have to pick an openings which are very solid, and then your opponent cannot do anything. And you have to practice those openings, and then it's important when you learn the opening, not to learn only the first 3, 4, 5 moves, but to look some games in this opening to see what is the idea after you castle, what should you do next. And this is the thing that you have to develop very quickly to castle so you can hide the king. And then if your opponent has made some mistakes, like he's not fighting for the center, or he has left his king in the middle, to try to take advantage of his weaknesses. If his king is in the middle, you have to open some files to attack his king. If he's not fighting for the center, you have to push more pawns in the center and to take control. So basically it's this. Okay, guys, we have to finish for today. So thank you for joining for our first session. I hope it will be plenty more to come. And I wish you a good day, and hopefully see you another time. Okay, bye from me.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I hope that you all learned something of value. And yeah, as I always say, keep chasing. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.